And again, another day, another drama. Hello, friends, welcome back to Sorry What. As promised yesterday, here's part 2 of our story. If you haven't listened to the first part yet, I'm linking it, so make sure to watch that first, so you don't miss any of the action. Ready? Well, let us begin. I contacted my lawyer. To start off with, when we divorced, the house was appraised at around $300,000 with about $200,000 in equity. That was 5 years ago. Since then, we had been faithfully paying on the mortgage, and property values had gone up significantly in our area. By doing a bit of research online, I estimated that the appraised value was now around $500,000, and the equity was more along the line of $450,000. Yes, we only had $50,000 left on the note. Why was I doing this? Well, obviously for the money, of course. Who couldn't use an extra $250,000? Besides that, there was the fact that it would totally piss Kayla off. She loved that house, and having to give me a penny for anything would cause her to go through the roof, and I was looking for whatever payback I could get for what she did. This would also reimburse me for all the maintenance and mortgage payments I had to make for her. The call came about a week later. Tom, what the hell is going on? Well, Kayla, there isn't much going on here. Just working and fixing up the house I bought. What's going on with you? I do have to admit my surprise at you calling to see how I'm doing. After all, this is the first time you have talked to me since the divorce. You asshole. I'm not calling to see how you're doing. I'm calling to see why a realtor just came to my house to look at it and get my signature on the listing contract. Oh, that. Well, it should be pretty self-explanatory. Since both of our names are on the title, she would obviously need your signature for the sale. What sale? I love this house, and I am not about to sell it. Then when can I expect you to get me the check for my half of the equity? Nice try. I got the house in the divorce. Nope. You only got the use of the house until Josh graduated from high school. That happened last month. Now, we can either sell it and split the proceeds, or you buy out my half. If you think that I'm going to give you $100,000 for a house that is rightfully mine, you're crazy. Well, that proves that I'm not crazy. I'm not asking for $100,000. You could have done that 5 years ago. Now, since the equity in the house is more like $450,000, my half comes to $225,000. Factoring in all the expensive furniture that you just had to have, let's just round that to an even $250,000. You're insane. I'm not giving you a dime. She screamed as she hung up the phone. Yes, I was laughing after she hung up on me. Yes, my lawyer did take his cut, but it was worth it a couple months later to see her face as the judge ruled in my favor. I even managed to convince the judge to make her pay the court fees, as well as my lawyer, for having me take her to court over something that should have been handled out of court. The house appraised for more than I estimated. With the value of the furniture, I ended up with $275,000. They ended up buying me out instead of selling. I was to find out later that it was mostly Clarence's money that they used. That would end up coming back and biting him in the ass, but that's for later. I had managed to get the house in pretty nice shape. I even put up a nice size shop behind the house. I had picked up an old 1972 Chevy pickup that was in bad shape. All I was really interested in was the rolling chassis. The rest would be replaced anyway. Over the last year, I stripped it down, cleaned it up, and completely repainted the whole thing. Once the paint and bodywork were done, it was time to start on the running gear. The rear differential was still good, but I went through it anyway. It would need to be able to handle the power I was going to be putting through it. The transmission was a Borg-Warner T10 manual 4-speed. That was the quick stuff. I decided to have fun with the engine. This was just going to be a toy, not for everyday driving. 427, big block. I managed to find one online from a salvage yard. I bought it and had it shipped. Once it got here, I put it on the stand and began pulling it apart. I had to send it to a machine shop to get it the cylinders, crank, and cam board. New forged crankshaft. 10-1 pistons. Nice heavy cam. I had the heads ported and polished, then had the valves done with double springs. Then, a blower to top it all off. Yeah, I would probably be passing more gas stations than tire shops, and I would pass very few gas stations. I chromed the valve covers, polished the aluminum on the blower, and used all steel braided hoses. Popping the hood almost required sunglasses. The first time I took it out on the road, I almost wrecked it. I was on the freeway and decided to punch it. Big mistake. The back tires broke loose instantly. I barely managed to hold it straight before I was able to let up off the gas. Note to self. Press down slowly on the accelerator pedal. I drove a bit more carefully after that. It was a few weeks later that I saw an advertisement for a car show that was open to the public. Thinking that would be fun, I filled out the form and paid my entry fee. When the date came, I loaded up the 72 Chevy and drove over to the park. I checked in and was assigned my spot. As I was setting up, I noticed a really nice 1968 GTO parked beside me. I set up my shade structure in my area behind my truck. The couple chairs and my cooler finished my setup. That's when I noticed the attractive Redeeds setting chairs up behind the goat. Yes, I said Redeeds, as in plural. There were two of them. One looked about my age, and the other looked to be in her mid to late teens. Probably still in high school. There were two very significant things that I did not see. I did not see a guy with them, and I did not see anything on the third finger of the older woman's left hand. Of course, I looked. "Good morning. I like your car," I said cheerfully. They both looked up from what they were doing. "Hi. Thanks. I like your truck too," the older one said. "Thanks. Have you been to many of these?" "This is my first one. I mean, I've been to car shows before, but only as a spectator. This is the first one that I've ever entered anything in. My name's Tom, by the way." "Well, this is the third time my daughter and I have been in one. My ex took it to a few before though. I'm Marie, and this is my daughter Jenny." "In that case, when you are done, why don't you two come join me in the shade? I have a cooler full of drinks, and I could use any information on these shows I can get." We ended up hanging out most of the day. We would occasionally get up and talk to someone about our vehicles, but it was a very pleasant day. No, I didn't win any awards, but I still had fun. I learned that she had divorced her husband 3 years ago, because she caught him cheating on her. He was cheating with his boss's wife. She made a deal with him. She would give him all the videos, as long as he signed the GTO over to her. She told me that would really hurt him, and she wanted him to keep his job, so he could keep paying his child support and maintenance to her. It was a double win for her. Besides, his boss was an asshole, and she didn't really care if his wife was hanging the horns on him. Jenny was also friendly and got into the conversation. She told me that she was really pissed at her dad for his cheating. She didn't have anything to do with him anymore. We were having such a nice time that I didn't want it to end. When the show was wrapping up, I offered to take them to dinner at the Red Lobster a couple blocks away. They accepted, and we drove over. I didn't really want to be a downer, but they asked and had told me their story. I hit the highlights. I did tell them that my kids took my wife's side and had nothing to do with me anymore. "You mean that she cheated, and your kids blame you for divorcing her?" Jenny was astonished. "Yeah." I tried to explain things to them, but she had already poisoned them against me by that point. Marie put her hand on my arm. "I'm so sorry for you, Tom. You seem like such a nice guy, and you didn't deserve any of that," she said sincerely. I decided to change the subject to something more pleasant. We ended up talking and laughing for another hour. We seemed to have a real connection. We exchanged numbers, and Marie seemed acceptable to meet up with me again. As they were leaving, I saw Jenny give me a big smile, a wink, and a double thumbs up. I took that to mean that she was also really acceptable to me meeting up with her mom again. So, Marie and I did get together again. It was the next weekend. I had called and asked. She had enthusiastically agreed. Dinner and dancing. I got a kiss on the cheek when I walked her to the door. As I was turning to leave, I spied a teenage Redeed in a window smiling and giving me the double thumbs up. After 2 more dates, I invited them both over to my house and cooked them dinner. I had learned to cook pretty well after my divorce. Food Network, a few YouTube videos, and a lot of trial and error. I do make a really good lasagna, so I went with that. They seemed to like it. They really liked my house, but I did overhear Marie telling her daughter that it definitely needed a woman's touch. I wouldn't have argued if I had been asked. The next weekend, I was invited to their apartment. Marie's cooking put my feeble efforts to shame. Even Kayla wasn't as good as Marie. I couldn't help it. I know that it's rude as hell, but I just couldn't stop eating. I finally had to apologize to them for making a pig of myself. They just laughed and asked why I was apologizing. That was the biggest compliment you can give to a woman that loves to cook. She told me that Jenny was almost as good as she was. It was 2 weekends later that it happened. I had taken Marie to dinner then a dance club. We had been dancing for a while when a slow song came up. We were pressed together as we swayed to the music. We had graduated to some pretty hot make-out sessions a few weeks ago. She leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Take me home." Frankly, I was surprised. I thought we were having a great time, but now she wanted to go home. I pulled back to look at her. She must have seen the look on my face, and she began giggling. "Oh, you silly man. I meant take me to your home." "Oh, well then." Thankfully, I had my regular truck and not the 72. I'm not sure that I would have been able to keep the tires on the road if I was driving the 72 back home. I may be out of practice, but it came back to me pretty quickly. We ended up doing it 3 times before we fell asleep. I cooked her breakfast before driving her back home. I got another double thumbs up from the redheaded teenager in the window. A few months later, I asked, and she answered. It was a simple ceremony in front of a judge. They moved into my house right after we got married. Jenny even started calling me dad. Life was great. Yes, there were disagreements. Yes, Jenny and I had our differences as well. She was still a teenager, and I was still an authority figure. I did have to say no on occasion. Still, she respected me, and her mom loved me just as much as I loved her. The surprise phone call came about a year later. It was a number that I didn't recognize. Hello, I said as I answered the phone. Hi, Daddy. An excited woman's voice said on the other end of the line. Karlie. Yes, Daddy. It's me, and I have great news. Really? It's really good to hear from you. It really was good to hear from her. Maybe she was reaching out to reconnect. I'm getting married. That's great, sweetie. I'm so happy for you. Anyway, I want you at my wedding. Oh, sweetie. Of course. It's one of the greatest honors for a father to walk his daughter down the aisle. And I also set up a wedding fund for you. Oh, no. Clarence is paying for the wedding, and he will be walking me down the aisle. Also, since it would be really awkward for you and Mom to be sitting together, you wouldn't be in the front pew. But I really want you to be there. Clarence, as in the scumbag your slut of a mother cheated on me with. She actually married that piece of sheep. Look, Dad. I'm trying to reconnect here, and I wanted to reach out and have you at my wedding. Besides, after you left, she and Clarence started seeing each other more, fell in love, and got married. It's actually your fault. If you hadn't abandoned us, she and Clarence would never have continued seeing each other. Okay. I can see that you are still under the impression that your mother didn't do anything wrong. So, I will be unable to attend for 2 reasons. First and foremost, I simply cannot support a marriage where I'm sure it will fail. You are more likely to cheat on your husband, just like your mom cheated on me. If he is in any way someone that I would approve of, he would kick your slutty ass to the curb as soon as he found out. Second, you have just stolen the last great honor that a father has from me, and given it to a dirtbag that knowingly seduced a married woman. That just goes to show me what a shallow, self-centered witch you have grown into. Fine. If that's the way you are going to be, don't expect to ever see your grandchildren. If you raise them anything like you are, I want nothing to do with them anyway. Really, Dad. Mom is right. You really are an ass click, and that's the last I heard of my daughter when I hung up the phone on her. Well, so much for any chance of a relationship with my former daughter. Pretty sure that there will never be a relationship with Josh either. Yeah, it hurt. They still blamed me for what their mother did. I just set my phone down and moped out to the shop. Instead of wallowing in my sorrow, I would lose myself in working on the 1963 Chevy pickup I pulled out of a field a couple months ago. This one wouldn't be as radical as my 72. I wanted to be able to drive this one a bit more. I was rebuilding a 350 that was just slightly beefier than stock. I never even saw Jenny sneak around the corner and pick up my phone. I didn't even realize that she was home. Karlie. I was so pissed off at my dad. Here I was trying to reach out to him, and he has the gall to talk to me like that. It was his fault that our family was torn apart. I tried to be nice and invite him to my wedding, and he just throws everything back in my face. I was hoping that he would finally take responsibility for what he did to our family. I looked down and saw my phone ringing. I didn't recognize the number, but there were a lot of calls like that when planning a wedding. Hello? Hi. Is this Karlie Williams? Yes. Can I help you? Yes, you can. You can stop calling my daddy and being a cast iron witch to him. He is the best man that I have ever known, and he doesn't deserve a stupid spoiled slut like you calling him, reminding him of the pathetic excuses of humanity that you are. I swear, you and your family are a waste of breathable air. Who the duck are you? My name is Jenny Williams. I'm your sister. My mom married your former dad, and he adopted me. I love him with all my heart, and I would never even think of disrespecting or dishonoring him in the slightest. You are an insult to daughters all over the world. I know all about what happened. Your slut of a mother went out on a date, completely disrespecting her husband, and ducked another guy. The really sad part about all that is that you seem to be okay with that. Let me tell you, my bio dad cheated on my mom. She didn't even hesitate to kick him to the curb. You can also bet your skanky ass that if my mom ever cheated on my dad, I would be right there helping my daddy carry her ass out with the rest of the trash. Yes, even though he isn't my biological father. He is the most decent, caring, compassionate person I've ever met. I'm thinking of sending your slut of a mother a thank you card for being such a big moron as to let him go. If it weren't for her abject stupidity, I wouldn't have him for a father now. Oh, and you can also tell your grandparents that they have another granddaughter, but I have absolutely no desire to have any sort of a relationship with anyone so despicable as to reject their own son for a cheating slut and her backstabbing offspring. There's one more thing that you can do for me. As you are saying your joke vows, look in your husband's eyes and think about when he decides to cheat on you. When he actually does cheat on you, call me and tell me about it so I can laugh my ass off at you. Have a shitty life, sis. Click. She hung up. I just stared at the phone in shock. First off, I was surprised to hear that my dad got married. You would think that he would at least send his children an invitation. Then hearing that I now had a younger sister as well, there was a strange thought that flew into my mind. I couldn't help thinking that she sounded a lot like me before Mom talked to Josh and me about how Daddy was leaving and going to break up the family over one minor thing. I had thought at first that Daddy must have had a really good reason for that, and I was thinking that maybe I could live with him instead of Mom. Then Mom explained how she was feeling and just needed this one little thing to rejuvenate herself. After all, it was only just one brief period of time compared to how long they had been together. Besides, Mom was willing to stay together and work things out. It was Dad who was being pig-headed and refused to even try. It was Dad that was leaving. He was the one breaking them up. I couldn't believe how rude she was to me either. She never even gave me the chance to tell her that it was Dad that left us, and that Mom was trying to move forward. It was like she didn't even care that it was just a one-time thing that shouldn't have even been a blip on the radar, considering how long they had been together. Then she has the nerve to call me all those nasty names. She doesn't even know me. And what was Dad getting so upset about? Of course, Clarence was going to walk me down the aisle. After all, he has been there for me for the last several years. I haven't even talked to Dad since Josh and I told him how mad we were about him leaving. Besides, Clarence was paying almost $20,000 for my wedding. I couldn't even imagine how far the pittance that Dad could put aside for my wedding would go. I was still upset about those phone calls a half an hour later when Mom and both grandmas came in. They had been out shopping. Mom immediately noticed my mood. "Honey, what's wrong?" I told Dad about the wedding and asked him to come. After all, I am his only daughter, and I thought that he would want to be at my wedding. I kind of hoped that maybe this would be something where we could build on and maybe start a relationship again. "Oh, that's wonderful," Grandma Williams exclaimed. "Will he be there? We haven't heard from him since he called about Thanksgiving a few years ago." I sighed. "No. He got pissed off when I told him that Clarence would be walking me down the aisle, and that I thought it would be too awkward for him to be sitting in the front pew with Mom and Clarence." "Oh, that's too bad. I thought that he would have gotten over his pig-headedness by now." "Well, if that's not bad enough, I found out that I have a stepsister about 5 minutes later." "What?" Sounded in 3-part harmony. "Yeah. A girl who said that her name was Jenny Williams called me a few minutes after Dad hung up on me. Apparently, Dad married her mom and adopted her. She was not very nice on the phone. In fact, the nicest thing she said was that she wanted to thank my mom for being stupid, otherwise she wouldn't have such a fantastic daddy." I recounted both phone calls to them. They were shocked at the vehemence that came from Dad and Jenny. "Tom got married and we weren't invited to the wedding. He never even told us about it. I have another granddaughter," Grandma Williams whispered to herself. The day of my wedding finally arrived. I briefly thought about what my dad had said, and had a moment of sadness that he wouldn't be here on my special day. Oh well. I had reached out to him, and he had rejected me. I shrugged it off. After all, this was a happy day. I was going to marry the man I truly loved. The man I was going to be spending the rest of my life with. Clarence was beaming in happiness as he took my arm, and we began walking up the aisle to the music of the wedding march. I was overjoyed as I took in all my friends and family. Both sets of my grandparents were there. Josh was one of Bobby's groomsmen. Everyone was here to celebrate my special day. Tears of joy began to form in my eyes. I looked ahead and saw my Bobby smiling at me as he stood before the minister. As we passed my mother, I could see her beaming at me with pride. She too had tears of joy beginning to slide down her cheeks. Clarence lifted my veil, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Congratulations, baby." He then handed me off to my soon-to-be husband. I had a strange niggling in my head when the minister asked, "Who gives this bride away?" And Clarence said, "Her mother and I do." Something didn't sound right, but I couldn't understand why at that moment. That soon passed as the minister began the ceremony. I was gazing into the eyes of the love of my life. I was repeating my vows. To have and to hold. In sickness and in health. Through good times and bad. Force a cough, force a I couldn't say it. I was staring straight into Bobby's eyes, and I simply couldn't say it. I suddenly thought about what that witch had said over the phone. I was staring into the eyes of my soulmate and suddenly saw him with another woman. The picture suddenly changed. Now I was looking into the dull eyes of a broken man as I told him that I had sex with another man. These pictures were flashing through my mind. The words came out without a thought. I understand now. If I had thought that we had the rapt attention of the audience before, that was nothing compared to what it was now. Bobby was looking at me with concern. Suddenly, it felt as if a weight had lifted. I got the biggest smile on my face that I had ever had. I finally understand, I said to Bobby. That's really great, Karlie, but what do you suddenly understand? Absolutely everything, I answered. Then I got serious. Bobby, do you really love me? Of course, I love you. How can you even ask that? I have to ask that because I can't marry you today. I swear, I could feel the rush of air blow past me as the entire audience gasped in shock. We will still get married, but not today. This isn't right, and I have to make it right. I'm only getting married once, and it will be for life, so I need to do it right. Baby, what's wrong? Bobby, I love you with everything I have. I am going to marry you. I will explain everything to you, and you will understand completely, but we need to go and begin fixing things. We will reschedule and have our wedding. You're not leaving me at the altar, are you? Not a chance. In fact, you need to come with me. With that, I turned to the guests. I'm truly sorry about this, but I just can't go through with this today. We are not canceling our wedding, we are simply postponing it. We will let you all know when we schedule the new date. We will understand if you decide not to attend, but just think about what a story you will have about today for years to come. Wouldn't you want to show up next time to see what happens then? Anyway, to try and make up for some of your disappointment, the reception hall should be ready. Everything is already paid for with non-refundable deposits, so why not go ahead and take advantage of that? It's an open bar, so eat, drink, dance, and party. Don't worry, Clarence is footing the bill. With that, I grabbed Bobby's hand and began to head back down the aisle. Suddenly, my mother was blocking my exit, and Clarence was standing there beside her. He didn't exactly look pleased that I just flushed over $20,000 down the toilet. I also noticed that all the guests were now focused on this new confrontation. Those that had stood up to begin making their way to the reception had stopped in their tracks to witness the next show. Clarence began shouting a bunch of crap about the money he spent, and that I was going to pay him back every cent for this stunt that I just pulled. Then it was Mom's turn. Karlie, what are you doing? Where are you going? She asked. What I'm doing is fixing a mistake I made several years ago. What mistake? The biggest mistake of my life. The mistake I made when I listened to all that bullshit you spouted off instead of helping my daddy throw your slutty ass out to the curb. The mistake I made when I blamed my daddy for breaking up the family when it was all your fault for cheating on him. Karlie, I am your mother. I'm not a slut, and you will speak to me with respect. Really, mother? You're not a slut. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Karlie, how dare you? How dare me? I'm actually ashamed that I looked up to you. It wasn't until I was looking into Bobby's eyes as I was saying my vows that I woke up and realized what a horrible person you really are. Once a cheater, always a cheater. As I looked into his eyes, I suddenly realized how horrible it would be if he ever cheated on me. I realized how badly I would hurt the man I love if I ever cheated on him. I guess Dad was a pretty good role model for me after all. You sure as hell weren't. WH, what do you mean by that? Mom asked. I could see a bit of fear in her eyes. Seriously, Mom. You think that I don't know about your Wednesday afternoon workouts with Jim Davis, your personal trainer? How they always happen at his apartment instead of at the gym. Funny how you only go to the gym to see Jim. How about how it takes Carlos, your pool boy, an extra hour every 2 weeks, because he is ducking your brains out on a chaise lounge after he cleans the pool? What about your gang banging the landscape crew every time after they have finished the yard work? I have some nice videos of that from when I came home early a couple of times in case you try to deny it. And let's not forget how you always tip Mario, your hairstylist, with a backroom blowjob after every hair appointment. At least Clarence is your boss at work, and he doesn't have to worry about you cheating on him with your boss. Am I leaving anyone out? Oh yeah. I almost forgot about Alan Morse, your neighbor. He's been coming over whenever his wife has her girls' night out for the last 3 years. Her eyes darted over to Clarence after I finished airing her dirty laundry. Maybe she hoped that he miraculously hadn't heard any of that, even though I said it loud enough to carry through the entire church, and he was standing less than 2 feet away. Clarence had a look of utter shock on his face. I had an evil thought just then as I looked at Clarence. Oh, and Clarence. In front of God and all these witnesses, I vow with the same commitment that my mom had when she made her wedding vows, that I will pay you back for the money you spent for this wedding. We all know how she keeps her vows, so you can fully expect me to honor that vow as much as she honors hers. Yeah, he shouldn't hold his breath waiting for so much as a dime. Seeing that Mom was distracted, I pulled Bobby down the aisle. I made a quick stop to talk to the videographer. Yes, he caught the entire thing on camera. He had a big smile on his face as he handed me a copy of the video. He was set up to make a duplicate copy just in case something happened to the original. I quickly scribbled my signature on a release form to allow him to post it on YouTube. I was hoping that it would go viral and increase my mom's shame. Bobby and I dashed out to the parking lot. He had driven his car here, and our bags were in the trunk. We were planning on switching them to the limo before leaving the reception. His brother was going to drive it back to his apartment after the reception. I smiled knowing that Daddy was really going to like Bobby as I slid into the passenger seat. "Where are we going?" he asked as we roared out of the parking lot. "Go west on 156. I'll find the address and put it in Waze," I answered as I began working my phone. It wasn't difficult. He wasn't really trying to hide, after all. I knew the town he lived in, and a search of property records gave me the answers I needed. It was about 2 hours away. Now, I just hoped that he was home when we got there. We didn't stop to change. I was on a mission, and I didn't want to waste time. Tom. It's not a very normal occurrence when you open your front door and see a woman in a wedding dress and a man in a tuxedo standing on your porch. I mean, if you happen to be a minister and actually lived at the church, I suppose it would happen occasionally. The problem here was that I was not a minister, and I sure as hell didn't live at a church. Even more surprising was that I actually knew who one of them was. I had no clue who the man was, but that was sure as sheep my oldest daughter standing there. My oldest daughter who made it abundantly clear that she never wanted to see me again. I did seem to recall that today was her wedding day, but I couldn't figure out why she would be here. She should either be at the church reception or on her way to her honeymoon. Standing on my doorstep was the last place she should have been. "Daddy, can I talk to you for a minute, please?" she asked in a very small voice. Still being stunned, I moved back and allowed them to enter. I gestured to the living room where Murray and Jenny were sitting. I noticed the shocked looks on their faces as well. Karlie, this is my wife, Murray, and our daughter Jenny. Jenny, Murray, this is Karlie. I'm sorry, but I do not know who the guy with her is, though. Oh, yes. Daddy, this is my fiancé, Bobby Jensen. Bobby, this is my daddy, Tom Williams, his wife, Murray, and my sister Jenny. Karlie introduced. Fiancé. I thought that he would be your husband by now. Didn't you get married a couple hours ago? I was confused. That's what I need to talk to you about. I couldn't go through with it today. I can't get married unless my daddy walks me down the aisle. Daddy, I finally understand. You were right. You were always right. I'm sorry for being caught up in Mom's bullshit and blaming you. It was Mom that threw everything away, not you abandoning us. I'm sorry for everything that I said and did. You didn't deserve any of that. I wouldn't make any excuses for my behavior, because there really isn't an excuse except being young, foolish, and listening to the wrong people. I just hope that you can somehow find it in your heart to forgive me and to let me back into your life. I really, really want to marry Bobby. He is a really great guy, and I know you are going to like him. I just can't marry him unless you agree to walk me down the aisle and give me away. Well, this was completely unexpected. I probably should have focused on other things, but there seemed to be an elephant or two in the room. Even though I was really happy that my daughter had decided that I was not the bastard who abandoned them and wanted me back into her life, my overriding curiosity at the scene before me demanded some attention. So, Karlie. Did something happen at the wedding? I mean, you were wearing your wedding dress, and Bobby is in his tux, so I'm assuming that you were actually at the wedding. She looked down at herself, then over to her fiancé. Oh, yes. We were actually about halfway through the ceremony when I had an epiphany. Here, she said as she handed me a CD. Maybe you should watch this as Bobby and I change into regular clothes. Bobby ran out to the car and grabbed a suitcase, while Marie showed Karlie to a bedroom for them to change in. As that was happening, I set up the video player hooked up to the big screen in the living room. As soon as Karlie and Bobby were set, Marie came back and sat beside me while I pushed play on the remote. It started off as a typical wedding ceremony. The groomsmen escorted the bridesmaids down the aisle, then split at the altar. Bobby came in with the minister. Ring bearer, then flower girl. Finally, Clarence was escorting Karlie to the altar. It was all pretty typical until Karlie began reciting her vows. Even that was normal to a point. Suddenly, she seemed to have some trouble talking. It seemed that she was stuck on one word. She did it. I can't believe that she actually did it, and that it actually hit her like that. Jenny whispered to herself. I was about to ask her what she was talking about when Karlie stopped trying to say her vows and changed everything. We watched the video as she stopped the wedding and then confronted her mom. I was shocked at her revelations. Apparently, her cheating had escalated after she married Clarence. Karlie and Bobby had changed and returned to the living room by the time that the video ended. I just couldn't go through with it. I was looking into Bobby's eyes and realized how hurt he would be if I did to him what Mom had done to you. I finally understood what forsaking all others really meant, and that Mom broke that vow. That's when I realized how badly she had dishonored you, and that I was dishonoring you by getting married without you being in the place of honor you deserve. I mean, how can I make those solemn vows in a ceremony where the two most dishonorable people I know are in a place of honor? How can those vows have any real meaning when the most honorable person I know is not involved? I realized that if I was to really mean those vows that I am taking, it needs to be my daddy, the person who actually taught me values and integrity, that walks me down the aisle and gives me way. I decided that when I marry Bobby, it needs to be you there, not Mom and Clarence. Karlie paused for a minute, then smiled and looked over at Jenny. Besides, I need my little sister to be one of my bridesmaids. It was a kick in my ass that woke me up. I remembered what you said to me when I looked into Bobby's eyes as I was trying to recite my vows. How can I possibly get married if you are not standing up there for me? This was a lot to take in. We talked for several more hours. I hadn't known that Jenny had gotten Karlie's phone number from my phone just after I went out to my workshop after Karlie had called me that day. She went into her room and called Karlie on her own phone a few minutes later. It got late, so I had them stay in the guest bedroom for the night. Karlie had a couple of phone calls throughout the evening. She ignored the calls from Clarence and Kayla, but a couple of her friends called also. It seemed that several of the guests took her up on the offer to party away on Clarence's dime. He tried to cancel it, but it was too late for him to get his money back. By the time he got to the reception venue, there were already a few dozen people taking advantage of the open bar. The food was already being prepared as well, and all the servers, bartenders, and DJ were already there and working. Clarence finally gave up, got a drink, and moved to a table in the corner to drown his sorrows. Josh sent her a video he had taken on his phone when his mom went over to try and talk to Clarence. It didn't look like it went very well. There was a lot of yelling from Clarence. The words cheating slut took a big part of the conversation. It looked like that relationship was about to end as well. Josh said that he did manage to cancel the flight and resort reservations, but he was stuck with a 20% cancellation fee for late cancellation. Since Karlie and Bobby had already taken the time off work for their honeymoon, they stayed with us for the entire week. I got to reconnect with the daughter that I thought I lost. I also got to know Bobby. He's a great guy with strong moral values. It was a bit strained at first, since the only things he had heard about me were lies told to him by my ex-wife, son, and daughter. Well, not entirely lies, but more embellishments of the truth that painted me as the bad guy for abandoning my family. There were also a few relevant facts that were left out of those conversations as well. After the truth began to come out, he warmed up to me more. It helped when I showed him my shop and my latest projects. Even though he was more into the classic Dodges, we both appreciated each other's vehicles. Hey, we are both gearheads. At least he wasn't one of those wimpy guys that drove an automatic. His Challenger had a manual transmission. About halfway through the week, a new wedding date was made. It was going to be at the same venue on the same weekend a year later. This time, I would be paying for it and walking her down the aisle. Also, Marie was drafted to help with the wedding. Yes, Jenny was going to be a bridesmaid as well. Karlie and Bobby called everyone in the wedding party and gave them the updates, well, everyone except Kayla and Clarence. Over the next several months, Karlie and I worked hard on rebuilding our relationship. Bobby and I also got to know each other better. We went to several car shows, entering Marie's GTO, my 72 truck, Bobby's Challenger, and even had Jenny enter a 1974 Firebird that I got for her. Karlie and Bobby came over and spent a couple days with us a couple of times a month. Josh even showed up a few times. It was harder with him, because he was always closer to his mother than me, but we rebuilt some of our relationship. I think he did it more for Karlie than me, but I will take it. Besides, he always had a bit of news from home. Speaking of which, it was not going very well for Kayla and Clarence. Clarence had moved out and filed for divorce. The good news for Kayla was that Clarence filed under irreconcilable differences instead of adultery. That meant that the harsh penalties of the prenup wouldn't be enforced. He filed that way to get it over with faster and without a fight. The good news for Clarence was that he had a prenup. The prenup specified that all the assets he had before getting married were off the table. Kayla would get half of the assets built during the wedding, but there wasn't much of that once the assets from before the marriage were factored out. She would basically just get to keep the house and get about $50,000. As far as the house went, Clarence did try to get a piece of it, but he didn't have any proof that he had a claim. Sure, it was his money that was used to buy my share out after my divorce, but there was no real proof of that. Apparently, he took out a business loan for his company to come up with the money, but never documented what exactly he used the money for. Also, they never added his name to the title of the house. Since it was Kayla's house before they got married, she refused to even discuss it. Clarence ended up paying off the loan with nothing to show for it. By the time he realized that he wouldn't be getting his money from the house back, it was too late to refile under adultery. Word about Kayla's affairs spread, and her standing in the community suffered a big hit. Her friends began avoiding her, and the invitations to parties, charity events, and other events dried up. Even worse for her, since she didn't work and relied on Clarence's money, her financial situation suffered enormously. Clarence learned an expensive lesson. He was out a couple $100,000 from buying out my half of the house. He was out another $28,000 for the wedding that fell apart. He also had to pay Kayla $50,000 in the divorce. Then, there was the humiliation. Kayla was angry that her affairs were publicly revealed, and that Clarence was divorcing her the way he did. She began telling her remaining friends that she cheated on him because he had such a little dink, and didn't even know how to use it properly. She also told all her girlfriends that he refused to lick her, even though he demanded she suck him off. That kind of gossip spreads like wildfire. It didn't take long before every woman that he tried to pick up in a bar would simply laugh at him. He became something of a recluse, only going to work and straight home. His social life evaporated. "Ready, Daddy?" my oldest daughter asked. "No father is ever really ready to let go of their daughters, but I am honored to do this for you," I replied. The doors opened, the music began and filled the church. I stepped, beginning with my left foot, and proudly began walking my daughter down the aisle. I did a quick glance and my smile got bigger. My ex-wife was sitting in the fourth row. My wife, Marie, was at her place of honor in the first row. I would be joining her after I took care of my last important honor for my daughter. Who gives this woman to be wed? As her father, I give her to be wed. I spoke loudly. "Love you, Munchkin," I whispered to her as I gave her a kiss on the cheek before handing her off to Bobby. Yes, I neglected to mention my wife. No, it was not all my idea. Karlie asked me to do it that way. I then turned, walked over, and sat next to my wife. To have and to hold. In sickness and in health. Through good times and bad. Forsaking all others. Karlie practically screamed the last part out. Then, with a brilliant smile, she finished her vows. It was a beautiful ceremony. Cheers went up as they kissed at the end. I looked down from the head table. Marie was right beside me. I saw Kayla sitting at a table off to the side. She didn't really look happy. Every time she looked up and saw Marie sitting in her spot, she scowled. I did notice that she was taking advantage of the open bar. Clarence had not been invited. I really don't know if he would have come even if he had been. My last great accomplishment for my daughter was complete. I had walked her down the aisle, given her way to be married, gave a beautiful toast to the newly married couple, danced with my daughter to the father-daughter dance, then danced with my wife while my daughter and her husband and his parents danced to the second song. My obligations were complete. I was sitting at the table beside my wife. My younger daughter was out dancing with one of the posse of boys that were vying for her attention. "Pardon me, Marie, is it? May I borrow your husband for this dance?" I heard a familiar voice behind me request from my wife. Marie and I turned around to face my ex-wife. Marie eyed her for a moment before responding. "Just make sure you return him to where you found him." She looked at me. "I trust you, it's her I don't trust to not try anything stupid." I led Kayla out onto the floor. They started up a slow song. It wouldn't have surprised me if she had requested it just for this purpose. I was careful to keep a bit of distance and not pull her in tight. We danced for a bit before she started talking. "You were supposed to give me that one night. We should have moved past that and gone on like normal. This was supposed to be the two of us together today. And you were not supposed to have gone out that night. You should have known me better than to think that I would have been okay with you cheating on me, no matter how many times you did it." "I didn't cheat. I told you about it before I did it. I didn't sneak around behind your back. Whether you told me or not is immaterial. The fact that you had sex with someone else is cheating. Besides, I never gave you permission. I told you not to do it, but you did it anyway. I never wanted this. I just wanted that one night, then we could have been together forever. You know that you are the only man I have ever loved. There was never even the slightest amount of love for him. Besides that, the sex wasn't even that good. He was selfish, and he wasn't even as big as you are. Then why did you marry him? Because you divorced me. Sure, I didn't love him, but I liked him okay. After you left, I didn't want to be alone. I thought that I might grow to love him, but I could never get over you. I did all that shit to you because I was pissed that you left me. I still loved you, but you wouldn't even talk to me. After that one night, I realized that you were everything I would ever need, and I would never go out with another man again. So, why did you cheat on him, then? Because he was a dud in the sack. I thought that I could train him, but he refused to take any advice. He refused to go down on me, so I stopped giving him blowjobs. He would just stick it in, pump for a few minutes, spurt, then roll over and fall to sleep. When I couldn't take that anymore, I found a couple other guys that could actually give me an orgasm. I had no idea that Karlie knew anything about it. Even if I knew that she knew about any of it, I would never have figured that she would throw me under the bus like that. I'm sorry for you. We had a really great marriage, but you threw it away for one night of mediocre sex. I don't suppose there's any chance. I couldn't help laughing. Not just no, but hell no. First off, even if I wasn't married now, what you did in poisoning my kids against me killed any possibility of us ever getting back together. Now, I am married again to a woman I love, and I have another daughter that I love as well. The best I can offer is civility when we are at the same place and at any events with our children and grandchildren. Thankfully, the song ended shortly thereafter. I didn't talk to her again that night. She couldn't afford the mortgage payments on the house, so she ended up selling it and moving into a small apartment. She got enough money out of the house to be able to live on if she was careful. She did go out with her friends occasionally, but, as far as I know, she never had another relationship. Clarence ended up living alone as well. Karlie and Bobby had a long loving marriage. They had 3 kids. 2 boys and 1 girl. Josh eventually got married to a sweet girl as well. They had 2 daughters. As far as I know, neither one cheated on the other. There are those who believe that I should have sought revenge on Kayla and Clarence. The reality is that there was really nothing I could do to hurt them without either going to jail or having it blow back on me. I decided to just move ahead and live my life as best as I could. There's a saying, the best revenge is a life well lived. I did that and let karma handle the rest. Karma is a witch, and her stripper name is Vengeance. Clarence and Kayla were not burned, but they did not escape unscathed. No, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I still feel good about myself. I have my wife, my daughter, and my 2 other children back in my life. I am surrounded by people who love me. I have a good life. Ready, Daddy? My daughter asked. No father is ever really ready to let go of their daughters, but I am honored to do this for you, I replied. The doors opened, the music began and filled the church. I stepped, beginning with my left foot, and proudly began walking my daughter down the aisle. My wife was at her place of honor in the first row, smiling broadly. I would be joining her after I took care of my last important honor for my daughter. Don't worry, Daddy. I'm going through with this today. I talked to Karlie, and I'm doing it right the first time, Jenny assured me. And there we have the final part of our story. If you enjoyed this 2-part story, leave a like and comment before you leave. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any story, and I'll see you next time.